Today is a day when many people put on masks and costumes. But ironically, this ritual of Hallows Eve might be a memorial of taking off the masks and costumes. Of recognizing that's what we wear. And what's beneath the masks and costumes is real. Those masks and costumes are designed to frighten, perhaps because it takes courage to let them go. As I sit here quietly, withdrawing inside to discover what's beneath the image, it's not frightening at all. It's freeing. I, the spiritual being, I, the soul, I've always been here inside, however many masks or costumes I put on, different roles, different responsibilities. I'm still always here inside. I am eternal. And at the perfect moment, I return to the self. Let go of all the layers and labels. And reconnect with the self. The sign of having reconnected is a deep sense of peace. Because I, the soul, am the embodiment of peace. No masks or costumes required. And that is the sweetest experience. To retreat and discover within the self everything I've been seeking outside, everything of value. And peace, silence, contentment, lightness. Today, let me remove the masks and costumes rather than put them on. And free the self. unlock that inner peace. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Interview with Rajavi. And tonight's session is removing the mask and revealing the beauty. So, for souls who live, I'm sure you're aware today is Hallows Eve. And so, listening to the reflection, I was thinking a lot about being able to let go of the mask. And I know we've always talked about time as one thing, of course, but I was thinking about the impact of being around a kind of personality and kind of presence where you feel that you can let go and be yourself. And I was wondering if you can share more about what that presence, that vibration is, what those qualities are. Om Shanti. I've always felt that the number one quality or speciality of a Raj Yoga Center, Brahma Kumari Center, more than anything else, is to have the atmosphere where souls feel it's possible to let go, whether consciously or unconsciously. And I think the qualities, really spirituality is creating the atmosphere. So spiritual awareness, which is going to be a combination of very detached and very loving. What does that feel like for someone to be detached and loving, especially for those who have been taking Raja Yoga? I suppose it feels like nothing really disturbs the soul. So our innate or intrinsic nature, sorry, there's just a little bit of body issues. Could be any number of things that's causing the audio issues now. So we're just trying to keep an eye on that. Sure.
Okay.
Oh, you might actually need it for this one.
Okay. Let us know if this is better. We're trying. It's getting better. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Not influenced by anything. So the intrinsic nature of the self, very, very comfortable with the self, because I don't think anyone's going to feel comfortable in my presence if I'm not really comfortable or at peace with the self. So very unaffected in my intrinsic nature, which is actually quite respectful and caring, is all that remains. I'm just very comfortable with myself. There's nothing to prove. I'm not seeking value in the eyes of others, etc. So I think that's what creates a comfortable space.
Since that it is just really invisible in a way, it's hard to really articulate what it is, because I notice being around little children, many are really able to take off that mask.
Yes, that's a state of purity or innocence, which is the objective of our spiritual study. We could call it freedom rather than detachment. But we're consciously trying to move towards that stage. And so we use the power of truth to do that. But in that, if we're talking about little children, they're really not self-conscious. They really don't seem to care what others think. Again, that comfort with the self.
There seems to also be even no judgment towards others when you're in that state of freedom.
It always feels like everything starts with the relationship with the self. So if I'm not judging towards the self, I'm probably not going to be that way with others. So in the practice, we have relationship with self, relationship with God, and then relationship with others.
The only reason I was mentioning about not judging others is that others feel that vibration. Just because it's not even little children, but when you're around that certain kind of company, souls can't really actually articulate what it is. And I find that putting all that aside, it's the vibration of purity that I find very interesting. So I was thinking a lot about that actually with the commentary. And so for oneself, it's an interesting topic about wearing these masks. And I mean, most know it's all about ego, but that's one thing about talking about it. But in terms of being able to let go of one's own image as well, what do you feel is really needed? Because it's one thing to really be intellectual about it, or saying that there's a feeling many even feel that they just feel that they need to fit in, especially for those certain age groups where the feeling is very strong. It's the case with every generation. It doesn't really seem to matter, but it's we're talking so much about being able to endure a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty, to be able to let go.
I think the main thing about letting go in this case of mass is to be aware there's something underneath. It's when we don't know, is there life beyond ego? If we're not quite sure of what the alternative is, what's underneath the mask. So we spend a lot of time getting to know what's under the mask, and then letting go of the mask seems to come very naturally without actually focusing on letting go of the mask. It's more I'm embracing what's underneath the mask.
Have you been in situations maybe earlier in your study where it seemed like it would seem very challenging to be able to to sort of just let that go? And what is the role of being a detached observer of how ego plays? Because this is something that many students, or just those who are starting Raja Yoga, they feel they're in the atmosphere, the center. They feel very much, a sense of that. They may not use the word safety, but that letting go. But they're often challenged in lots of different situations where it feels like as if they haven't really made any progress.
So in the study, we look at two words in particular that can determine really how I feel, and those words are I and mine. So it's not that we create all those masks around those two words. So when I'm letting go of the mask, in a way I'm letting go of I and mine, at least a form of I and mine, which is false. So in the center, we spend so much time focusing on that deep, eternal, true sense of I and mine. And that's probably where it feels one's on a little more solid ground. But when we're in those other situations that we say challenge us, and we tend to blame the situation, in fact, I'm probably the false I and mine, which feeds ego, is really active. And that's something that I've developed the habit whenever I'm in that situation. That false I and mine becomes very active. So it seems like the situation's challenging, but it's just I need to in those situations, pay a lot more attention to who am I and what is mine.
So what if it's so overpowering? Is there anything that one can practically do based on what one's learning to actually start to move forward?
I think what we do when we're seated is we're developing the strength in a non-threatening situation. So this idea that, I'm suddenly going to have strength in a situation where I haven't actually been working on strength doesn't make any sense. Even physically, it doesn't make sense. So I need to have a practice of developing power so that I start to have that power, can use that power in those situations.
So is that practice just only seated though? Because the whole point is to be, what can I be practicing? Like, what does that look like for souls? That's one thing that often happens, is that souls are often mentioning that I'm learning about these concepts, but actually bring them into practice. Sitting is one thing, and that's also a question mark, the quality of what one is practicing. But moving from what I learn to actually experiencing what are perhaps maybe some things I need to pay attention to.
So when I'm in seated meditation, I get to develop the faith that this is possible because I'm experiencing it without distraction. I'm completely focused. So I develop faith that yes, I do have these capacities, and that's really important. The only thing that's going to help me to convert that, because we're talking about deep-rooted habits, is attention. So I had a funny incident the other day. It's a little embarrassing to share, but I will anyways, because I think it illustrates. So I know two people that are named, have the same name. It's an Indian name. And one of the people is a female, and the other one's male. The one I spend the most time with this name is female. Now, in this practice, we refer to each other as brother and sister. So I say their name with a Ben at the end, which is sister. So we say so-and-so Ben, so-and-so Ben. So it's a very deep habit, very deep. Now I'm in a meeting with other people, and this soul who has the same name, there's a brother. I was not even aware I was referring to them through the entire meeting as a sister. I kept saying their name, Ben. And others looked, one of them actually sent me a message privately saying, do you know what you're doing? And I didn't, the habit was so deep. And even after they alerted me, I still kept doing it. I wasn't paying attention. So we have, again, this won't become a power usable unless I apply what I experienced seated, absolutely. All that's going to be required is to be very attentive when you're dealing with deep-rooted habits, the habit to put the mask on, because ego, not me, ego feels threatened. I just have to pay attention.
Now, there's a concept you've mentioned in inner fitness. And so I don't know if this is useful for souls, but in terms of the relevance, you often are sharing that physically speaking, there's certain, I'm not sure if there are muscles in the body, hip flexors that just constantly fire. And they're firing when maybe it's not purposeful firing, purposeful functioning of those, and should be other muscles that are firing. So there's a habit. So now that's a physical thing, trying to just even break that habit. We're talking about attention, but sometimes attention can lead to tension, and someone could be really paying attention, but they're just physically gripping more and more anyways. So it seems like there must be some step that's missing in between. Because some souls do mention that they are trying to pay attention to being soul conscious, but they're getting a bigger headache. So there seems to be something that's missing in between. So, and that's just one example. souls often here are paying attention, and there is tension. So what is missing in between?
We've often been told that for there not to be tension, there has to be love. And love means attainment. So, even earlier today, a few days ago, I got a very interesting message from a soul who lives in another country, that they wanted to start to be more active, and they wanted a method of accountability. So they asked if they could just send me messages every once in a while saying, I've walked, I've done this, and all I have to do is acknowledge it, really, which fascinated me that they were doing this for themselves. So today they wrote and said, okay, I did this, and I seem to notice I'm having some resistance to and it kind of fascinated. I just said, well, what is that? You need to figure out what's going on. If you need to adjust another way to get the same attainment, that's fine. But we know there's going to be a battle. We know that habits will always, so we're often told you need to have deep love. So the experience of what benefit am I getting out of this needs to be really meaningful and deep, not driven by guilt or shame or low self-esteem or anything, but just really because there's something right with me. This is what I want to do. I really need to sort that out. And it will always come back to our first lesson of I am a soul. To be in that alignment changes how I experience everything. When it comes to the hip flexors, which is one of the most overused muscles in our body, as you're sitting right now, your hip flexor is probably firing because there's a hinge at the hip.
Should they be?
It's necessary, yeah. But there is, so when people do a classic yoga posture, boat pose, the thing that gets them is their hip flexor cramping. Mm. Now, the boat pose is not meant to be done with the hip flexor. There are things that one can do alignment-wise to turn off the hip flexor from firing. It's like gold. So that's what I need to figure out inside is I've got this opposition going on, these old habits firing. What actually neutralizes them? So that they might want to fire, but developing this powerful understanding of the self such that in that situation, they don't fire. It's going to require an alignment shift. And we're talking spiritual alignment. So an awareness, a consciousness, an attitude that's going to neutralize. An example of what we're talking about is that in many situations, if souls make a mistake, they feel bad. And that they think that's the way it's supposed to be. So there's this alignment. I feel bad when I make a mistake. It fires every time. And I actually think that's the way it's supposed to be. And there's something that I need to understand very deeply, not just because someone told me, but something very deep, some alignment shift, some worthiness, something needs to shift inside. So that's completely neutralized. So that's kind of the inner subtle adjustments each of us needs to make.
You were sharing about love. Mm-hmm. And love is such an interesting thing, as we all hear it. We probably all have a completely different experience of what it means. But it's interesting because you often hear where there is love, there is no ego. And so because we all have different ideas of it, does that necessarily mean that there's only one accurate way? Or is it again, making sure that the seed of that is pure, regardless of maybe what it feels like or looks like? Because everyone, for someone who's very disciplined, to tell them to correct something, they can take it with no problem. But for someone else, they can't, and then they just shut down. but if they were, I'm not sure, maybe a correction in a different way, they're actually able to move forward. So is there a common denominator?
I suppose the bottom line about love is it's going to have to, whatever I think it is it effective in helping me to, yeah, and unconditionally effective. I remember once saying to a senior student, I have very deep regard for you. And they looked at me and said, but not love? And it was so interesting because in my mind, that is love. So yes, there can be very different concepts of all of this. The question is, does it get the job done? Whatever concept I'm holding, is it keeping me stuck, or is it helping me to move forward? For a very, very long time, in many situations, this so-called love was keeping us stuck. So then we would use the term tough love if it was, and I don't know what, that's kind of an interesting concept. The bottom line is that it needs to move me out of the fear, to be something that helps me to let go of the mass. Very deep love. So we kind of partner love with words like recognition, understanding, tolerance, attainment. So these are things that actually might get the job done.
So you're sharing in terms of these removing the masks, and the mask is this body consciousness and everything that comes with it. And you were sharing about, faith, having such faith, just even in seated, just that recognition. Do you feel that just really igniting that again and again in a very vibrant way, that you can carry that feeling into what seems like the challenging situation, when it's actually kind of like the hip flexors of ego just coming up, that you can actually, I don't know what it is, like the power to, just really not go there with ego?
I think it's possible if I'm very careful. So in seated meditation, we're giving birth to something very precious, but quite delicate. It's very subtle. So it can be extremely powerful for me, that experience, but I will have to make sure to hold it very carefully. Careless means that I kind of forget about it. So much of our study is about, we say attention, but remembering, and even remembering these experiences that we have in the infancy of the day, if you will, the childhood of the day, the early morning hours. So I just have to be, again, attentive, very careful to hold that experience so that it can accumulate more and more.
So I know we started a little late, so that's why we're running a little late as well. But I was thinking a lot about vibration, and what is it that one who can be soul conscious, just to become that, and because ultimately it feels like we wear these masks because of value or fear of losing value. And what has your experience been like? Because when you had shared in the very beginning, when you learned about full consciousness, you immediately had this, I'm not sure what happened through the journey, but that recognition, this has a lot to do with self-respect. What has your journey been like in terms of experiencing the quality of soul consciousness? And has it gone through all sorts of, different experiences, from real to unreal, deeper and not so real and not so meaningful? And have you found that the more meaningful it has become, that you can actually feel yourself letting go of this false sense of self as being what we often put on the front in so many situations?
I definitely think it's a lifetime journey. And it's as if coming out of very deep sleep. and can constantly feel the opposing forces trying to numb it, make it a less vibrant experience, because it's really asking for complete detachment from everything that is not part of soul consciousness. So it's a big leap. So those attachments are really, really fighting back. So, but they're really, there was a point in our lesson this morning, which is actually what this whole thing was based on. That really, it's a small little thing, but it really stayed with me. It was saying that in a utopian world, a perfect world, diamonds are like stones, and they're of no value whatsoever. And I loved it so much because it really indicated how upside down we are. That the things we think are most valuable are actually not valuable at all. And the things that are really valuable, we've completely dismissed. So that's going to take a while to turn that thing right side up, and constant attention, we often use the word brainwashing, washing all the pebbles out of our brain, if you will, all the crazy ideas that we've embraced as the masks became more and more tight, really felt we were the mask. So there's a lot, so it's a constant journey of love, quite frankly, but at least to recognize, to have that a moment, even a second of recognition of, oh yeah, there are things that are more meaningful, more valuable, and it might come and go. If I have, again, back full circle, that daily practice, the speed will probably be better. Right? If I'm on a daily basis reminding myself, or being reminded, oh yeah, this is right side up, this is right side up, that probably is going to help me out a lot. So creating a structure, having a structure where I am spending daily time in these ideas that are trying to awaken sense within the self, I think is really important.
So this is the last question we'll have. It's about describing the lens of a detached observer, soul consciousness. Can you describe, because we're all letting go of ego, of what the experience has been where ego comes out as a personality, and you feel like you've actually been meaningfully being able to observe what's going on, and to not get critical with yourself, but actually be light? Can you describe like what that looks like? Because oftentimes the hip flexors of ego is you get frustrated, or maybe you just want to leave the situation, or you get disheartened, like here it comes again.
So much we are praising mothers in this spiritual journey. Mother, oh mother, you're the bestower of fortune. We're an organization that put mothers in front. I am always just so in awe of the power of understanding. Understanding will unlock, if ego has us in a deadlock, understanding will unlock it over and over. I've seen this in myself. So that I come back to a very loving but disciplined place. Real love does involve discipline, where change is involved. So the power of light, of unlocking, and it's so interesting with Halloween, it's all happening in the dark, which is a bit frightening. Darkness represents ignorance or lack of understanding. So the masks will stay on. So I really need a lantern. I really need, there's always an understanding. So this example I gave earlier about this brother and sister, I was like, what is going on? I was really, it's a horrible thing. The poor brother is sitting there. Everyone's listening. I keep referring to him as a sister. People are correcting me. I'm still not, and I came up, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a horrible mistake I've made. And then I, trying to defend myself, and then to understand, I understand why I was doing it. I understand. You know, this deep habit of referring to the sister who has the same name. And then I always know I've unlocked it because I'm entertained. It becomes very light. So the light of understanding makes me I'm entertained. You know, it's even, and I don't mean, of course, there's some very serious things that can happen, but I don't mean to devalue these things, but it makes the soul so light or entertained to
So
see
you can
the
still
soul.
be light even though it's still happening.
Yeah, yeah, that's a sign that I'm in the right light, the right understanding.
There's hope.
Mm.
Well, that's one of the biggest things I've definitely learned within the last several weeks is the level of nonviolence that one discovers that one can have in this study. And so we'll have a little reflection now.
Halloween is a thing that happens when it's dark, the eve. And I know that it's become quite dark inside most of us, the human soul. And so scary things do emerge within the self. But there will always come a point where the evening ends and there is light. It is inevitable. The light of truth, the light of understanding, the light of remembering. For every soul, it will happen. I shine that light within myself, simply remembering I am light, not this physical body, but I am the entity of spiritual light energy, a spark of living light, eternal, intrinsically good, a child of God. How far I had moved away from that sense of self, but now feeling more and more attracted to the light. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. Speaking of light, our public Diwali program, save the date, Sunday, November 19th. It is at Scarborough Hall, I believe 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Yes. So we are almost ready in terms of sending out the registration links. So hopefully we'll get that then posted on the website soon, and we can send that out by email. But again, save the date for that. And as usual, we have Raj Yoga session. I believe it's in English. And so that's always on the Wednesdays of the month, and it alternates English and Hindi. So that starts tomorrow, and it's the first 4 Wednesdays of November, and it's at the Inner Peace Center. So you're welcome to still register for that through Eventbrite. You can go directly to the website. We always have an English workshop as well at the Inner Peace Center. That's only on site, and you can find those details as well on the website and Eventbrite. Otherwise, lots of drop-in online and on-site sessions. So we welcome you to take part in that. Lots of sustenance and just practicing and experiencing. Om Shanti.